All right. Happy Tuesday, everyone, and welcome back to another Learning Tech Talks, where we are continually exploring the landscape of, I'm just going to say, all things tech and skill learning. I change this literally every week, Kristy, just so you know. But today we're going to be talking pragmatically about full life cycle skill development. And if you're going, what does that mean? Well, good. That's a good question to ask. And I'm so glad you asked, because we're going to answer that. And we're also going to be breaking this down into really pragmatic terms in terms of some of the recent things that we're seeing. If you haven't followed the SVB incident and everything going on there, like how skills really matter, even in the age of technology and AI. So to join me on this one, Kristy McCann Flynn is joining me from SkillCycle, formerly Go Coach, though, right? You did a whole new rebranding thing with it.
Yeah. No, awesome. Thanks, Chris. And I'm thrilled to be back. And I could explain the rebranding if that's helpful. It's beyond the logo.
Let's do that one. Let's talk about why from Go Coach to SkillCycle, because people may have seen the original one and now, or maybe they haven't, which you could go back and look at this, but just look at this one and then you'll get the whole story.
So, hi, thrilled to be here. Kristy, former HR exec for a long time. I created Go Coach as a very easy entry point into organizations to provide upskilling with our coach marketplace and learning experience platform. And, we work really well with a lot of organizations, but the North Star has always been to bring it all together, right? We have a lot of these monolithic and disparate systems within performance management, engagement, content, mentoring, what have you. And they just hold all this data. And this data is really key to how we need to develop people, right? And so, who goes through a performance review, gets a bunch of feedback, and then that's it. See you next year.
Goes off into the digital landfill.
See you next year. At most they get is some generic training, and maybe a privileged few, actually get some core development. And so with SkillCycle now, we own the entire, landscape of performance management, engagement, workforce analytics, and learning with our Coach Marketplace and Learning Experience platform, so that we're taking all the important, development data on people and actually matching it, to plans, with our coaches and content that are personalized for them and their roles, their goals, and everything they need to do. And here's the best part is that their goals are tied to it. Right. So this is not just some fluffy thing, from the sky. It's connected to the overall company and organization goals and their goals.
Well, because when we talked last time and it was Go Coach, which again is still a really important problem to solve in organizations. Like a lot of people are not getting that kind of personalized development, so it was solving that problem. But to your point, a lot of times that's left even still similar to the performance review. It's like, okay, now we've got this other thing that we're filling where it's like, okay, now I'm getting feedback and personalized coaching, and this is great, but it's leaving the employee in this awkward space of, so do I have to connect the dots?
Right. What's next?
Right. What's next? Okay. So I'm getting this coaching. I'm also having this annual performance review that goes somewhere that I have no idea where. And then there's nothing in between. So was that always the vision, though? Was the vision always to bring that together? And now you're just kind of fully getting there?
Yeah, we led with learning first because the bar is low, as we've seen the last couple of days. People need help with communication, change management, collaboration. So we were easily able to go in there and make impacts within these organizations, right? But to the whole thing, now what factor? And it's just why am I learning something if it's not connected to my goals, my role, my career, right? And so we've bridged that. This is the what's in it for me factor that makes sense for where they are to really meet them where they're at. And for HR and, executive stakeholders and managers, they have complete visibility into an organization. And so they can continue to give feedback based on progress that's connected to their roles, that's connected to their goals. And so we're not waiting, every 6 months to a year to be like, hey, your communication skills suck. It's you could have told me that 364 days ago. You know what I mean? And now what do I do? Oh, do I Google communication skills? Do I go to LinkedIn Learning? There's 1,000 communication classes. What sucks? What do I need to do better within, my role? So we're making it very easy, by bringing data and development together in one core hub.
Okay. Okay. Well, and that makes sense that that's always been the vision to get to that point, because you've got to start somewhere. And usually I'm thinking the landscape of the overall HR tech stack, trying to go full cycle out of the gate could be a lot to try and bite off out of the It's like, okay, you got to have, to your point, we've got to have an entry point in where how do we actually prove out that this is a capability and a need that you have? Then how do we expand out of it and help you see that there's major gaps in the way you're doing it today?
Yeah. I mean, when you look at like HR tech stacks, like ATS, check. I can do all my candidate stuff, like, you know what I mean? And hiring stuff, like, you know, I have my, you know, human capital management, HRIS, payroll benefits, check. Then you have the other side of the coin, like, you know what I mean? LMSs, performance management, engagement, OKR, workforce analytics, mentoring platforms. Like, it's just like, oh my God, it's overwhelming, right? And it's extremely costly, and it's not connected to anything. It's just doing something.
Well, and it's dealing with the people side. Like the way you broke it down, I think is an important thing for folks who may not be as familiar with the HR tech stack, because there is more this operational type stuff. It's like, well, we got to do payroll, we got to do recruiting. Like you said, we got to bring candidates in and manage that. But that's very operational in nature, versus what we're talking about is like, okay, you're dealing with people. This is messy. Like it's messy and inevitably can be a little chaotic.
Yeah. Okay. That's how we're using tech as an
And when did the change, when did the official change happen? When did you officially, because last time we talked, or even when we were preparing for this one, you still had a Go Coach pillow sitting behind you. So like, it's not like that far behind us, is it?
No, we kicked it off at the beginning of the year. We have been working on this for the second half of the year, because like, you know, I really want to take on that whole development, you know, area, and, you know, really develop a people development operating system, right? Like, you know, I mean, to be able to manage all these things, you know, with tech enablement. And we've labeled it, you know, human capital development. So we launched it in January in Atlanta, and it was fun. It was just a great, you know, event with from day one, you know, to kick it off in Atlanta. And Atlanta is where a lot of our investors are too. And so, like, you know, we got to have a big offsite and big team meeting. And then I went up and, you know, launched SkillCycle. And, you know, HR tech conferences are, you know, they're pretty boring anyways, until, like, you know, you actually get to the alcohol at the end of the day. But I went up and, you know, spoke about what we were doing. And then there was literally like a rush of HR people to a booth, which I've never seen happen before. Like, we were not giving away anything free at that booth. And the first question that was asked is like, is this for real? I'm like, yeah, like, I want to see it. Like, you know what I mean? Because like, it automatically clicked with them. Like, why am I doing all these like archaic things that like lead to nothing? Like, we spent all this time and money and energy going through performance
and people's attention. We're asking people to do all this stuff. And people aren't stupid. I mean, honestly, if you spend time talking to the workforce and you ask, like, they're like, I'm asked to do it. I do it because I have to, but like, you tell me it's important, but I'm not seeing any of it.
Like, there's no why behind it, especially if you're not connecting it to goals and development. It's just, it's stupid. And so like the light bulb was going off with them, and it was just like, it was extremely validating, right? Because I've been in HR for about 20 years, and, you know, I've had questions. It's like, you've been in HR for 20 years, but you say you don't like any of the platforms. I'm like, I don't. Like, why? I'm like, tell me one HR person that built one of those platforms, right? Like, if anything, a lot of those platforms that have been out there have inhibited me from doing my job, not having the visibility that I need within my organization, not being able to, you know, provide the path and the plan, you know what I mean, as far as overall development. You know, I spent a majority of my 20 years in HR, you know, mastering pivot tables by connecting, you know, systems together to try to get a snapshot, and a lot of wine, you know, try to get a snapshot. No, I did. Like, I would pay $100 for a system, and I still couldn't get out of it what I needed.
I know, we've got full-blown people analytics teams behind here doing, okay. So let's define this though for folks, because people may be like, okay, I think generically I'm understanding, because we kind of talked about the journey from Go Coach to SkillCycle, but when you, obviously it captured a lot of attention at the HR conference. So when you were describing what SkillCycle is, like, what exactly is it? I mean, in a quick summary in terms of how do you package that?
Yeah. It's essentially bringing human capital development, which is performance management, engagement, learning, and overall workforce analytics along with goals into one ecosystem that works with each other. Not a feature set. These are workflows, right? So, Chris, you just went through performance reviews. I heard that you have terrible communication skills, like awful, right?
They're the worst. They really are. Just ask people around me.
And so we have this data now that, from the 360, from your own, etc. And this data starts to immediately open up the door to the coach marketplace and learning experience platform for coaches and content to be able to create a personalized plan for you as to how you're going to, do better with your communication skills, like, and get what you need that's managed and measured, and that's connected to your goals. So everything's all connected. It's data is automatically flowing to development that's personalized for you, that's managed and measured, along with your goals to be able to get the outcomes that you need. And so that enhances engagement, retention, productivity, and by the way, actual skill and goal accomplishment. So not only that, saves HR a boatload of money. We are a CFO's dream right now because the fact that we have created one stack to take care of this all, not only is a great fiduciary responsibility instead of having to use multiple things, but it ties to things that matter to an organization, like goals and outcomes and productivity.
Well, and what's interesting about what you brought up, because I think where I was going to clarify, because the industry, and for good reason, I think sometimes gets nervous when they hear all in one, right? And for good reason, because it's like, well, when you say all in one, then are you good at everything or mediocre at everything and not good at anything? But what you brought up in the beginning, though, I think would be a differentiator, because what you're doing is not we're the everything you would ever need, but what you're saying is this is a workflow, which it is. When we really think about performance and skill development, this is a single workflow that, to your point, often is completely discombobulated, which is unfortunate because it should be a seamless process. What you just described, hey, we're having a conversation on your performance and what you need to accomplish. All right, there's some shortcomings and some things where maybe we think you can grow you. What do we do about that? How did you do on that? How does that tie to, and it's just continuing that cycle. So yeah, I think it's, if it's fair, it's not that you're trying to be the all things to HR tech. It's this very specific workflow cycle, which often spans, honestly, the number of platforms that usually are involved in that one single workflow is insane.
Yeah, that's the issue. They just create feature sets, right? And features aren't going to help me. I need to mimic the tech is there to enable the workflows within an organization, the work of what you do, right? It's about that. And when tech doesn't enable that and it becomes a hindrance, which it has, right? It's just, crazy. So I've been in HR for 20 years and I've been asking the same age-old question for 20 years. Why are we giving people report cards, i.e. performance reviews, without giving them learning? Right. So
hey, you got an F. What can I do about it?
So what? Sorry, I've been in HR for a long time. So we go through this process that's complete hell. And then we do nothing.
For everyone involved. For everyone involved.
But again, this is a workflow. Now, whether it's a right or wrong workflow, we've made it right. It flows into development right now. But non-HR people that went and built these things, they just built things based on what they would hear or what they dealt with, from their overall user experience, not understanding that this workflow attaches to an entire bigger, greater component of the organization. It's that's why you have these monolithic systems that don't talk to each other. And so, yeah.
Well, I want to talk about that, though. No, because this is a really important piece in thinking of performance as a workflow. Because again, to some of the challenges that we run into, and we'll tap into the AI conversation later, not now, but it's one of these things that we often operate under the assumption that we run a clean ops management. Oh, well, our operations are in place, which if they are, sometimes then you can get away with this, well, let's augment this part of the process with this thing, and let's augment this over here. But quite frankly, this performance workflow in pretty much every organization I've ever encountered is a dumpster fire a lot of times. I mean, it's a mess. And so when you stand up tech around it, that is like, oh, well, we really specialize in this one area. And it's like, well, but this is a single workflow. So you can't just set up this lemonade stand over here randomly and think like, well, they'll come get lemonade. And it's like, yeah, but the kitchen's on fire over there. Like they're not going to come around and get a nice cool glass of lemonade. They're concerned about the building burning down type of a thing. And I can see where if you're not thinking about this as just a consistent life cycle, then you are going to miss it.
Yeah. Hence SkillCycle. That's how easy it was to come up with the name after.
Yeah, I was going to say.
Yeah, I love the Go Coach name, but everybody and their brother is a coach right now, so had to kill that. And for the audience out there, coaching needs to be certification. Needs to be legitimacy. It's not just every random person out there. But we wanted to protect the clout and credibility of our coaches who are certified and masters of what they do. Without I didn't have any control over that name anymore. And so that was another reason, like making sure that you're getting learning that is legitimate and it's applicable to what you're doing, and connect. So
on this workflow piece though, okay, and I'm curious, just I've got a point of view on this, but I'll try not to tip my hand before we get into it. When working with organizations on this workflow, inevitably I've run into orgs where everyone thinks like, no, ours is completely unique and different. And so I can see some of the challenges that, you can run into where it's like, well, how does this account? Where do you draw that line between, no, it's regardless of whether you have nuances to your execution of this, it's the same cycle versus, oh, we need to reinvent the workflow every single time?
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good question. I mean, a lot for like the mid-market companies, like, 100 up to 5,000 employees, which is our sweet spot. It's the same workflow. Now, where they have different competencies, absolutely. They have different goals, absolutely. They might actually give feedback to their employees more than once a year. We see, very good. Like, and so, it's about creating, a very flexible and amiable products, like, that really meet people where they're at, right? And so if they want to, have different questions within 360s, by all means, go for it. If they want to bring their own content that they have created, that's going to, be part of this workflow that marries goals to, roles and skills and all that, we can enable that. If they want to leverage their, own mentors or coaches in-house, great. Fine by me. Like, we can enable that. So, but at the core is the same. And the core is we gather data every single year to ask employees how they feel. And then we do nothing with this data. We do reviews once or twice a year, and then we do nothing with this data. And then we create, learning, mentoring, and goals and all that are not connected to anything when the data is literally sitting right there. To give you the answer. And so, it's again about establishing, that workflow of data and development coming together in a constant cycle of learning that's connected to your roles and your goals and your outcomes, and to be able to get to, that skill advancement and enhancement.
Okay. Well,
that's managed and measured.
Yeah. Well, and I think to your point, and this is where it makes sense. And, for folks who listen or watch and are going like, well, our cycle looks like this. It's like, well, but what you're describing has the flexibility to say, yeah, there's a recognition that the way you run your cycles might look different. But at the end of the day, you're going through this same process like you described. You're having conversations about things. Ideally, you should be. And then you're asking people to do things about it. And then you're evaluating whether or not they did that. And then the cycle continues and you're going through this and finding different ways. And whether you need to have flexibility in, well, the frequency of that or what people have to develop or these other components. Yeah, there's flexibility to be able to augment and customize or configure. I guess I like to use the word configure versus customize. It's like, we'll configure the cycle, but you're following the same cycle. We're not going to make an infinity loop because that's just not the way it works. You can't reinvent this thing.
Yeah, I mean, I've been in HR for 20 years. The only difference between an enterprise company and a mid-market employee company when it comes to these cycles is more employees. right? So,
Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? When I was at Pearson, it's just like, oh my God, there's too many employees. Like, I have to be accountable of like getting all these reviews done. Like when I was at Constant Contact, I'm like, oh my God, this is gonna be so easy. I have like half the employee population. But I mean that's the only difference. And it's about, you know, tying those competencies to actual, you know, goal and scale outcomes. I mean, that's where the meat of it is. And that often gets lost within translation because anyone can hit a goal. It's how you do it that matters. Right. And so we're really getting into the how of that. And, you know, taking that feedback and, you know, creating outcomes out of it for overall, you know, goal and skill enhancement.
Well, so let's transition this into some of the why this matters, because I think it's a really fair point to call out. Because again, it's one of those, I think sometimes we lose that part and then it sounds like, oh, this just feels like more to do on top of it without necessarily seeing the connection to it. Yeah. So like, as you think about some of this stuff, and we've got a very, very recent example of what can happen. But I think regardless of whether you were impacted by the SVB bank or even knew about it, I don't think I've been in an executive conversation in the last, I don't know how many years, that the concern about skills and skill development hasn't been a major topic of conversation. Like, hey, we have this gap. Like, what do we do about it? And a lot of times people struggle with it because, like you've said, the workflow is broken. It's like, well, I don't know. Yeah. We tell people where the gap is and then it goes off somewhere and maybe people are doing something about it, but we have no idea and we don't know how it's going to know where that's happening. So, yeah, I mean, let's unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. So Silicon Valley Bank, SVB. I had some money in there. You know, most important thing, don't put all your eggs in one basket. I was diversified. I think that's lesson learned, number one here. So, you know, the good news was that even though we were still scrambling, you know, I had money to pay my people. Where we were scrambling the most was that, you know, SVB, like sent out payroll early. I sent out like, you know, AP for the coaches early, you know, paid my vendors early, you know, then moved the rest of the money early before the whole thing went crashing down. And then I literally stared at my computer and watched processing for like 12 hours before the whole thing just disconnected. Right. So what did we learn from SVB?
I cannot imagine how stressful that had to be. By the way, when we were exchanging emails, I was like, I would be having a heart attack.
I mean, I'm pretty sure my team took a lot of like, you know, pictures of me, like literally like staring, like to see if it moved, like have you moved? Yeah. And then the whole goddamn thing got shut off. And it's just like, wait a second, like I got to pay my employees, like, you know what I mean? So, you know, talk about communications and change management. So I'm going to give you the story and I'm going to point how skills would have really helped, you know what I mean, with this. So, you know, we get a note, you know, from the Fed, I don't know, around 3:00 on Friday. And it was just like a small little note. And, you know, I sent it to my CFO and, you know, COO. And I was like, can somebody break this down to me like a 2-year-old?
Mind you, not from the bank, right?
No, nothing
from the bank.
No, nothing from the bank. I got to deal with the government now because apparently the government has my money. And so I sent the note, you know, to my CFO and COO. I'm like, can you break this down to me like a 2-year-old? Because this basically says I'm screwed. They're like, yeah, that's an accurate assessment.
It's actually like, exactly what it says.
Yeah, I'm like, who sends a message like this? First off, like, hey, don't worry. We don't know what's going to happen. This is what we're doing this week and to figure things out.
Right. No, crisis management. Something bad has happened. What you don't say is like, well, everybody, world's on fire.
Yeah. They're just like, no, you'll have 250K, you know, on Monday. I'm just like, F you, 250K. I'm just like, that's a shit for me. Like, you know what I mean? And so communication breakdown across the board, right? Then the system went down. Again, no communications or any change management plans, nothing. Now, I'm sure tons of stuff was going on behind the scene, like who's going to buy this? You know what I mean? Is the Fed going to bail them out? Like, you know, we could only assume. But if you imagine,
you know, people weren't sitting back smoking cigars and sipping cognac on this. Like people are freaking out doing things. Yeah.
Right. But like, again, no communications basically say, hey, there's a bunch of us that are working on this, like, you know what I mean? And we hope to be within you soon. Like, you know what I mean? I have a disconnected, you know, bank account now and, you know, I have no visibility. And so I immediately started communicating with my employees because like, this is now becoming front page news, right? And the thing that, I'm looking at, I'm looking at this
well,
as an
and
employee.
this is, I mean, I'm just laughing like in a sad laugh because this isn't a unique story. Like it'd be one thing if it was like, this has never happened in the history of the world.
Yeah.
This happens all the time. And employees see the news and go, wait, what?
Yeah. This is the news. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, wait, does Kristy have her money with, SVB? And like, I'm thinking as an employee that if I was an employee, like, you know what I mean? And I knew that we bank with SVB, like I'm buying a house this weekend, right? Like,
right. Am I going to get my
paid?
house?
Like,
Is my check coming through?
Am I getting paid? Right. So I started to immediately communicate with my employees like, hey, not all my eggs were in one basket. Like, you know what I mean? I got other banks, like, you know what I mean? The issue is more that this is a logistical nightmare. I sent out payroll, I sent out AP, like, you know what I mean? I transfer money. It all should be processing. The issue is that it said processing, and then I had no access.
We just don't know where it's processing
I have
from,
no idea
and we're trying to figure this out, but don't worry, we're going to get it taken care of.
And so I was just like, but, this is what I'm going to do. I was just like, if it doesn't go through, like, you know what I mean, I have money in other banks that we could run, like, you know what I mean? I was like, and not to mention, like, we had a lot of our investors call us, like, hey, Kristy, like, do you need us at the spot you payroll? I'm like, no, I'm actually good. Like, you know what I mean? So like my investors are communicating with me, which is excellent because not every, single investor did that. And then I immediately started emailing the coaches also, just letting them know the situation. This is what I did. This is what we're doing. This is how I'm going to rectify it. If the whole thing goes down, I'm just going to connect, my payables and accounts and all that to the other account. And it might be worst case a day or two late. And if it is a day or two late, let me know. I got checks and I'll overnight you a check. Like, you know what I mean? Like, right here, I'll overnight you.
We'll send the Pony Express to your house if there's an if you're going to lose the closing on your house, let me know.
Yeah, exactly. Sure.
Otherwise, it might be a day or two you might lose.
Right. So the best set of be, so I'm sending all these communications, right? Because this is my job. Like that's my job, is to communicate with my people. And all these people, all my coaches and are emailing back like, wow, Kristy, thank you so much for communicating. Like nobody else has been doing this with me. And this like, you're exceptional. Like I am not exceptional. I'm doing my job, right? And so like the fact that like nobody's communicating, and then you have everybody on social media putting their hypothesis out there instead of communicating it with their employees as to what they were doing, how they were doing, right? And so we all knew a bank run was going to happen. Like that's what became completely obvious Sunday.
Yeah.
If the Fed didn't step in, there was going to be more to come down. And then, in a weird way, SVB being the first is kind of good, because if we were last, we might not have the money back and whatnot. But I mean, very little communication, very little change management, no crisis management whatsoever. Like, I mean, no clear timeline of next step. Like the first communication I got from SVB Bank was last night at 10 o'clock at night with the new CEO. And by that time, I had taken all the rest of my money out there. And what's also, terrible about the situation, I loved working with SVB. They had amazing customer service. They had amazing connections. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
we talked about how they enabled
all the biggest
entrepreneurs
that are out there.
Huge
companies, right? That they were connectors and they were masters of their trade. And so because of the mistakes of the exec, like the CEO and all that, that is not reflective of what was going on. The employees did their job and they were excellent. And that's why I was a customer over there. So I just want to make sure is that like, there was skills that were used, you know what I mean? Yeah. But unfortunately, it wasn't the right people using them that mattered for people like me, that mattered for people like my employees. And so when you look at all the things that broke down within the last 4 days, no communication, no change management, no collaboration, no situational
which are
leadership,
all skills.
Emotional intelligence.
These are all skills.
Efficacy.
These are all skills that you can grow and develop, which going back to, and again, so I know we're kind of unpacking this tabloid stuff, but I mean, for good reasons, because this does help illustrate why does this stuff matter? Because I can't tell you the number of conversations I'm in where people are saying skills, but it's one of those, do you really understand how this can fundamentally throw the world into chaos if you don't get this right? This isn't just like, well, if we get to it or we fix this, type of a thing. But it's when crisis happens that you actually see like, oh, Oh, here's why it really matters that we develop the skills and have the right people and know where the right people are. Because to your point, it's not only the skill piece, but it's also making sure you know where those skills are and that you're leveraging them in a time of crisis or when these kinds of things happen.
Right. I mean, it happened 3 years ago with COVID. All he had to do was come out and acknowledge that there was this thing called COVID and that they were working with everybody, to get it fixed. And instead, he splintered everybody, blamed, China for everything. I mean, and splintered this country. One communication could have mirrored a different impact, And that's what's important, because this is not about us. Yes, I was freaking out about SVB, me in my head. It was about my employees. It was about my coaches. I need to be there for them, right? And if I'm not there for them, why are they going to be there for me? And that is an act of leadership. And all those skills need to be there in order to be a leader. And no, I am not the best leader. I screw up every goddamn day, right? But where I continue to be transparent and where I continue to enhance my communication and change management and all these different things, they trust me, right? Even when I do screw up, they trust me. How many other employees, think about that like they're leaders, right? And because you don't have these skills, you do not have trust. And the minute, even if you do have trust, it's probably fake trust, like it was at SVB, right? Everybody probably trusted that CEO because he looked like a really good CEO, but he messed up and he basically told people that he didn't have money and that he was going to go get it. Wait a second. All my money's in there. You need $2 billion. Might want to keep that in the boardroom, buddy, and go get the money.
Right.
Okay, so he messed up, right? And there was a lot of mess ups. So I'm using it as an example because it happens. I'm transparent with my employees too, but there's
it happens.
Right?
Which some of the things you described, I can completely see that there would be leaders who would go, that level of transparency freaks me out.
Right.
And it's like, I get it. And can I think of times in my career where being transparent has come back to bite me?
Yeah.
It has. It has. But when I weigh that against when transparency has been vastly worthwhile because of the trust it builds and whatever, and even when those things come back to sting you sometimes, it ends up getting just toppled over by the fact that but then everybody dogpiles on the fact that it's but that's not actually the norm type of a thing. It balances. It doesn't balance the scales. It's
but it is a balancing act, and it's a skill.
It is.
You know what I mean?
It's a skill.
Again, it's
You're
a
spot
skill.
on.
You gotta critically think, right? Another social media has killed all critical thinking and inference. You know what I mean? Some jackass wrote an article for the Washington Street Journal over the weekend, talking about the SVB demise, and basically said that because of their diversity, that's why they screwed up. You kidding me? You know what I mean? Because of their diversity, little people like me had access to capital and connections that I would have never had with the big four, right? That this is, do you know what it is? Again, I think his name's Andy Kessler. Yeah. You got a diversity issue within yourself because you don't have the skills to be able to do your job, but yet you're out there talking about it like you think you're an expert on it. You need those skills within DEI and culture and engagement to be able to understand that diversity has helped businesses, small like me, become very large through, these opportunities that I would have never had.
It would have not been afforded to.
Right. And so, and I
channels.
I'm not wearing a vest and I don't have, spiky, greased out hair, Silicon Valley Tech Bros, which they, associated SVB with. No. Yes, there was Silicon Valley Tech Bros, but then there's people like me, right? Yeah. And that's very important. And to ever say that, diversity, is why, somebody failed, just goes to show how many skills you lack and how stupid you are. And which goes to the whole conversation of ChatGPT and AI. Because if we're stupid and racist, ChatGPT and AI is going to be stupid and racist. We constantly need to be skilling ourselves and our employees to have better outcomes and better tomorrows, so we don't have a lot of what just happened within the last 4 days. It's all skill.
Yeah. It's all, I mean, this is why I get really amped up on the skills conversation for good reason. Cause to me, when I look, and it's why I got into the human side of things, even though I was I never had spiky hair. I didn't have enough. I bleached it way too much when I was, in my youth. But realistically, as a tech head looking at people, it's like skills are the ones and zeros of, everything. It's how things are actually working type of thing. But what I want to do with this, because I think we can help bring this back around, because we could look at this and there's probably organizations out there, maybe they didn't have an SVB collapse, right? Not on that scale, but every organization out there who hears this can probably think of something that hit where it's like, oh shoot, I can relate to when we had that crisis moment. And oftentimes it's what you do that helps you rise out of the ashes behind that, where you're like, okay, it happened. What are we going to do about it? And I think this is where sometimes organizations are now with the skills, where they're looking at it going, it's a mess. We don't really know what to do with our skills. We aren't really sure how to handle this. So what do we do now? And I'd love to just kind of talk about how kind of addressing this life cycle of skills. Let's just hypothetically play this out for SVB and go, okay, look, the whole thing blew up. I get it. But how do you move forward from a skills piece? And let's tie it back to some of that, because I think there's some real value that people could take from that going, oh, okay, I can relate to that story.
Well, the number one reason that CEOs fail, and this has been consistent for like 10, 15 years in a row, is lack of change management. Because yes, there is crises, but it's that the core skill enablement is change management. And change management is you have a bunch of new people starting. Change management is you're having a reorganization. Like, change management is that you have a different manager. Change management is that you have a different job. You're getting promoted. You're getting demoted. It's all the cycles of an employee. In any situation. So to give an example of like how this ties back, when I was at Pearson Education, we acquired a lot of companies at that time. Every time we acquired a company, we were really good at acquiring them. We were absolutely terrible at bringing them into and integrating them. Like, it's just
integrating them into the ecosystem.
Yeah. Oh, it's like, oh, great, shiny toy, throw them in the playpen. Like, let them figure it out. So I was tired of, running around in circles with my head chopped off. And so, like, one of the biggest skills that I brought into the organization, into the leadership, and into the managers, was actual change management. That like everything is a change. And by the way, we're going to probably go out and acquire a bunch of new companies and then divest a couple other, and people are going to say, does my role change? So do my goals change? Like, Like, what's the overall plan? What does this mean for me? And so by instituting, not only that training, but development and coaching within the organization, we essentially start to create this trinity of a project plan, right? Because everybody looks at change management as fluffy. Change management is not fluffy. It is project management 101, right?
It's very operational in nature. People don't always see it. It's very operational. Yeah. I've never understood we don't got time for that. I'm like, what? This is like process 101.
Yeah. No, it's process, it's communications, it's reinforcement, it's planning, it's getting buy-in, from your management and from your employees. And so that when we do need to change, that the oars on the boat or change direction or what we need to do, you actually have people rowing with you instead of like jumping off ship, right? And so this happens all the time. Like, I remember I had this like favorite manager. I did not want to leave this leader, but I had this guy who called me and said that if I didn't lead this leader, go and work with this other leader, that he would inhibit my job. So I'm like, wow, that's a doozy. Could have had a lot better bedside manner communications in that one, but yeah, I didn't want to leave him because I not only did we have a good cadence of working with together. I didn't want to leave because establishing trust in with the new leader and that fear, right? But that was a change for me. Your employees go through that every single day, right? With any new person that comes on the team, what does this mean for me and my role? Any manager change, never mind an acquisition and all that. It's all about change, and we got to be able to communicate, what those changes are. We need to have plans for what those changes are. We need to be able to reinforce what those changes are. And these all go to the soft skills, but what I like to call powerful, durable skills. You master change management, you have mastered communication, you have mastered collaboration, you have mastered situational leadership, you have mastered EQ, you have mastered remote management, because especially now these days, it's like, trying to get employees back into the office, and how do you work with these, hybrid situations? Like literally every customer we talk to is like, I need remote management training. Like it's not remote management training or coaching. It's called communication, collaboration, change management.
No, that's just
it's
it.
like, it's not. So we're constantly dealing with it. And the more that we enable ourselves, you know what I mean, to be able to have a lens of what our gaps are, but then to have a path as to how we build, like, you know what I mean, these skills that do a better job.
When you really think about it, that's what we're giving people. We're giving them change management to their career in many ways.
We make it too hard. We make it too hard. Like, you know what I mean? Like, let's go through performance reviews and waste 3 months of our lives and then throw it away. Like, you know what I mean? And instead of giving people the skills that they need, and we're taking that friction out, we're taking that tension out, it becomes all one cycle, right? You know what I mean? So there's going to be changes never going to stop. We have seen that. And nor should our skilling. Skilling should be evergreen. Like, it's taken me 20 years to master being a decent communicator. Do you think if I was in my 20s and I was running a company and this SVB thing went down, do you think that I would be communicating with my employees? No. I'd be at the nearest bar freaking out, right? Because I didn't have those skills in my
or doing what a lot of people, right? This is where you see these polar extremes of bad things happen. They go radio silent because it's like, I don't know what to do. I'm freaking out. I'm dealing with my own emotions and I don't whatever. Or you see the Elon Musk things where it's like you fire off an email and say, you got to decide, if you don't, your job's lost. Here's the form to fill out, to say I'm done. And it's like, what? Like, these are these extremes that happen when you don't have these skills.
Yeah, I mean, Elon is fantastic at communications. He sucks at emotional intelligence, right?
Right.
And imagine how good.
Right. Imagine if you bridge that gap and had
the skill
development cycle of going, you know what? We love your passion. You're brilliant. We love the fact you're quick to respond to people and let them know what's going on.
But
could we maybe consider the audience a little bit?
Well, not only that, do you know how much more profitable he would be?
Right.
Okay. Because like he has people burning and churning in those companies because like, the emotional intelligence is not there. Communication, check. You will absolutely know where you stand with this dude.
Yeah, you will know where you stand.
You will know where you stand.
Things are. There's no
ambiguity. If you're going to be hiding underneath your bed covers, like, fearing to go to work every single day, not good. Right. And so like, again, if you don't have skills, it costs you money. Every single one of his companies right now is costing him and his shareholders money. Why? Skills. Like it all comes down to skills. So when CFOs are saying, hey, we don't have money for budget, organization isn't doing well, blah, blah, blah. No shit, Sherlock. Your organization's not doing well because people don't have the skills to do their job. And we've just been constantly recycling and replacing them, hoping that the new person that comes in has all the skills that we would ever need. That doesn't exist, right?
No, does not exist.
Yeah. So when you build your skills base, you're building your money base. And when you build your money base, you're building your productivity base. And when you build your productivity base, you're building your customer and employee base. They all go hand in hand.
So I love that we got to this point because I got into a really, really spirited conversation. Heated debate. Let's just say the other day, it wasn't on camera, but it was a heated debate about this because I was debating with someone about whether to invest in people or performance. And it just drove me bananas because I'm going, they are not in conflict with each other for all the reasons you just described. Like when you are not getting the people side right, you are cutting into your performance. You are literally cutting it. To your point, does Elon have more money than he probably will ever know what to do with? Yes. But it's like, just imagine how much more money
you have.
Much more money. I get that you might be like, I just don't care, so I can do this. But it's like, you could be that much more profitable and not make people's lives miserable and just be blowing it out of the park.
Yeah. He could have his own colony on Mars right now. I mean, no, I'm serious.
Well, and not even just money, but even progress on some of this stuff. Because these people there's so many people killing themselves in jobs they hate and not even knowing what they're doing. So imagine, and I've seen the performance change in people where you're like, this person's a high performer under the worst conditions. You put them in great conditions and you're like, I didn't even know that level of performance was even possible.
Right. You know, it is. I mean, like I was in HR for 20 years. I'm made of armor. You know what I mean? But I have been in some, there's no taking me out. But the difference of people, going back to the leader that I didn't want to leave, not only did I trust him, I thrived under him. He taught me so many things. I got so many skills. There's so many things that I replicate 10 years later in my own organization because I was able to thrive with them. And the reason I thrived with them, he gave really good feedback. You know what I mean? It wasn't always good. It wasn't always rainbows and sunshines. Like, you know what I mean? He made me want to work harder. He empowered me, right? You know what I mean? He made me critically think. Like he really took a lot of the things that were like dormant in me and brought them to life. Right.
Yeah.
And then, you know,
brought out the best in you.
Brought out the best of me. And, you know, and it's because he possessed all these skills. And then when they transferred me down to New York with the psycho there, everything that I built, no, it was literally gone overnight. I was no longer Kristy. I was a shell of Kristy and working in a toxic environment. And then I became toxic. I sucked at my job. Like, you know what I mean? Within that, because I couldn't think, because I couldn't breathe, and the only thing that saved me is that I had the CTO and the head of sales and the CFO who came in and filled those skill sets that I was getting from Jim up in Boston. And that I was able to work and be productive again. And to the point when I left that organization, they all sent me, even though it's ugly as hell, they all sent me the boat org with a note that basically said, "Thank you for steering the ship." But again, that's what good leadership. They made me want to fight again. They made me want to learn again. You know what I mean? I got out of that toxicity stew that I was in because of the unknowns, because I was not working with somebody that had a skill base that was even equivalent to me or the rest of the organization. And so, like, this is how you lose money. I was getting paid coin. I definitely didn't work I worked, but I definitely didn't work for 6 months. Like, yeah, you know, and they're paying me and, you know, goals are getting missed, but, you know, and so it all comes back to money, right? And even when you look at all the different skills that people need, you could attach a dollar of productivity and profitability to it.
Yep.
Right. Even with some of the stuff that's going on, you know what I mean, on a worldwide basis, it could all be applied and go back to skills.
Well, and that's even just what you described. And this is where I see some of the misnomers around this stuff. It goes in kind of two ways that I've experienced over the years. One is the example of Jim. Well, I don't know if Jim's his real name, but we'll use Jim. Is a lot of companies will be like, we need to hire Jim. Like, let's find Jim. And they spend, and again, going back to it's money, they will spend countless resources looking for Jim. We have to find Jim. We have to where's Jim? And we'll pay Jim 10 times what we would normally pay for this role just to get Jim. And it's like, well, I mean, I guess that's one way to do it, but there's only so many Jims.
Right.
I mean, there's only so many Jims. So what are you going to do? Because that's certainly not scalable to say, well, how do we just get Jim? And the other one is, you'll see like, oh, well, we'll just set everybody through this training course and hopefully they'll become Jims on the other side. And it's like, no, that's not it, because that's not how it works either. What you described is a skill set that Jim had that can be developed in other people, but you don't want to create a bunch of Jims. You want to create a bunch of people with the skill sets that Jim has that can lead the way Jim did.
Exactly. And that's what it is. I mean, it's about giving everybody the opportunity to be able to advance within their skills, right? Even when we go through performance management, maybe a privileged few, get a coach. Like, I mean, everybody else gets some stupid, generic training.
Right.
then why would you only, no, seriously, like, why would you only give
send you to a conference?
Right, send you to a conference, because we all know what great drinking events those are. So why would you give only a few of your employees?
Right.
So going back to SVB, right? Why would you put all of your eggs in only a few people when you have an entire organization that you could scale and be even more profitable with, right? Like, you want to spread the wealth, you want to spread the skills, you want to spread the opportunity, you want to spread the diversity, you want to drive that engagement, and you want to create a safe culture. Do you know what the biggest thing that I missed about Jim is that not only did he teach me a lot of things, he made me safe. And he didn't make me safe, you know what I mean, because he told me everything I wanted to hear. He made me feel safe because he was giving me the skills that I need to do my job better. And we, even though there was a lot of friction in that, like, hey, Kristy, you're really screwed up in that one. You might want to have thought about this different way. It made me want to excel in a safe way. And the email that not Musk, the other Zuckerberg just sent out, okay, to his employees about what they're going to do. There's no safety in that. There is no meeting people where they're at, and there's nothing about skills, development.
No.
And it's only going to go so far. That has a shelf life. These companies are hurting because of their own demise and
Right.
of them.
Well, and I think that going back to the fact, of this, as this is a performance and financial conversation. This is not this like squishy, nice to have, wouldn't it be nice if we could all have beanbag chairs? And, it's like, this is not what we're talking about.
Right.
This is not about creating a happy island type of a thing. This is like, no, this is actually what brings out performance in people. And like you said, these are self-inflicted wounds.
Yeah.
These are self-inflicted wounds in organizations where they've done like what you described. Well, we're only going to invest in these handful of people. We're going to, look for Jim everywhere, and Jim isn't everywhere, type of a thing. And it's like, you are cutting at your bottom line in these things in major, major ways.
Yeah.
So the other thing I'm curious in what has helped with this from your vantage point, because I think hopefully anybody who listens and watches to this, if you're still doubting that this is a financial or performance thing, we'll do another session on this one where we'll just do a Q&A, live Q&A on this. Because similar to you, Kristy, I love going toe to toe on these when it's like, I don't really know if this is going to make a big impact. I've seen over the years, but one of the big things is sometimes I see this rooted in almost this scarcity mindset of, but if, I hear you democratizing and bringing the best out of everyone, and like, but then will there be enough left for me type of, and I'm like, what? But it's a real concern that I do see people have, even if they don't vocalize it. It's one of these like, yeah, but if everybody else is getting more of the pie, doesn't that mean there's less of the pie for me? And I don't know your experience. I've never seen it play out that way. Kind of like what we said with Musk, where it's like, no, he would just be an even bigger billionaire than he would. Yeah. He would not somehow be like, oh, now I got to share the stage with all these other people. It's like, no, you just keep going.
Yeah. I mean, not only that, you're being talked about for the wrong things. I mean,
right.
Musk, when he came out, I was enamored. I mean, everybody has been, and people still are. You know what I mean? With what he put together, with SpaceX, what he's done with Tesla, the innovation, the creativity, and all that. And, he's created really good companies. When I hear the name Musk, I don't remember that anymore. I remember the guy who went on Twitter and treated employees terrible. Because here's the thing. Nobody remembers what you did 10 years ago. Nobody remembers what you did 5 minutes ago. They're only going to remember that last minute. And that's the way that we got to look at it from a skills base too, right? Like, nobody's going to, it's not scarcity, like, of, lack of opportunity. It's scarcity of time right now. How much time we are wasting. Like, I literally wasted, like, I cannot wait for Friday because I literally have not stopped working for the last 11 days. Like, I'm totally taking a half day on Friday, getting a margarita. I'm turning off my phone, because I went all weekend, right? As did every other leader. And then like, finally the Fed came in and, woo, save the day, money's in my account. I wasted my entire weekend. Okay. When somebody could just said, hey, this is really bad. Like anyone, like I feel like Ross Geller from Friends. Like, remember he makes the pass at his cousin, and and he's so scared to say something, so his head's talking. It's just like literally just say something. That's what I kept on thinking all week, and I'm like, literally somebody just come out and say anything, literally say anything at all. And and I did the right thing because I did. It wasn't about me this weekend. It was about my employees, right? But now that's over. I have wasted time. You know what I mean? When I could have been spending even more time, you know what I mean, with building my employees. And so this is not a scarcity as far as opportunity. This is a scarcity as far as time. And guess what? We all run out of time. What are we gonna do?
Well, and actually we're wasting a lot of it by doing this type of stuff. And I think that's, you bringing this up, it just going back to growing up in a funeral home. I saw this, the point of what's the legacy you leave.
Right.
Your point, like it's not how much money you made or all the things that you did. Like those are not the conversations that are happening at your funeral when you're sitting there and everybody's sitting around talking about things like that. And that's a big and again, not that, and I think one of the things that's important that you have to kind of take the whole conversation into context is it's not a zero-sum game.
No.
That's, I think, the part that's so frustrating to see is it's like, well, yeah, I care about my legacy, but I also care about our company being successful. And it's like, those are not in conflict with each other type of a thing. And this is where it's exciting to see the tech bringing some of this together. Because the reality is, and I think this is where what you're doing with it, it is really valuable in that the reality is in many organizations, it is in conflict with time and performance because it's a broken process. We're asking people, to your point, to do things that it's like, well, we put these things in here. Are we ever going to do anything with it? No, we're just asking you to spend hours and hours of your time doing it for no apparent reason versus saying, no, let's fix that and say, no, it's going to require your time, but it's meaningful time. It's going to help you leave a better legacy, and it's ultimately going to lead to better performance in the organization.
Yeah. I mean, we got to stop the shortcuts. I mean, it just even goes with the AI and ChatGPT. Yes. Can they be very good things for us, like longer term? Yeah. But if we don't have the skills, then they're not going to have the skills. And so again, if you want ChatGPT and AI to work flawlessly, you better get your human beings, that it mirrors, even more skilled. Again, it leads to profitability, right? I mean, when things actually work and function, everything that we do in society can be tied to money, and we continue to limit ourselves by just allowing a few instead of allowing the many. We continue to limit ourselves by literally doing things and not attaching a why to it, right? We could stop that now, and that's really the whole point of SkillCycle. I mean, I was tired of being in the same hamster wheel, working with the same stupid tools, the same stupid processes, and having the same stupid outcomes. I built SkillCycle to actually stand up and get smart again, and to enable organizations to be able to do the same. Right? That there is a better way, and it's called your workflows, and we can enable them with our technology and make things all very easy for you. That's it. So. You make money. Well, I make money. My coaches make money. Everybody makes money.
Everyone wins. No, I mean, I don't think right. I think that's the ultimate positive message to leave on this is that you do this right. Everybody does win. We're laughing about it, but it's true. And I've seen it time and time again. When you get this right, everybody wins. And I think sometimes people have a hard time wrapping their mind around it because but what about this? It's like, well, that's when it's not going right. So correct. Yeah. When it's not going right, it isn't the case, but it can be. So this was fun. I knew we were going to have a spirited one. I know. So this was great. I appreciate you making it. I can't
believe we're at the hour already. Oh, well, thank you so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Well, thanks everybody for listening and watching. And if you missed the whole thing, definitely go back and listen. And thanks, Kristy, so much for making the time. I'm glad to hear you are at least through the chaos, and hopefully you can take some time off and get moved and get all that behind you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I can't thank enough the coaches and the leaders and the mentors out there who've made me and built me so that I could handle the situation in a somewhat normal manner. So thank you.
I love it.
I learned.
I love it.
All right.
All right. Well, have a great week, everybody. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.